Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very auspicious day, the day of the winter solstice in the Southern Hemisphere. Quite sunny. Apologies if I'm glowing unnaturally. I am human, I promise, and not a robot. Before anything else, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're streaming to you live from the traditional lands, variously, of the Wurundjeri, Boonwurrung, and Gadigal peoples. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers who may be tuning in from across the country and the world. We are very fortunate to be on a land and a continent that has, over 60,000 years of storytelling, and we are very, very proud to be continuing in that tradition. But at the same time, there is a huge responsibility that comes with that, where we need to confront, in particular, the horrors of things like colonization, disenfranchisement, stolen lands, that all have ramifications to this day. So, hello, my name is Adolfo Runwest. I am an editor, a writer, a dancer. You all should know who I am by this point, and if you don't, I really encourage you to figure out what you're doing with your life. But for the purposes of this event, I am representing both myself as a film critic and a general person who writes about and thinks about culture, as well as one of the co-writers of the TikTok series Scattered, which you can watch. I am joined by two incredible people, whom I'll introduce now. The first is Imogen McCluskey, who is the writer and director of the feature film Suburban Wildlife and the short film Atomic Love. Her latest web series, Love Bug, funded by Screen Australia, has over 2.5 million views on TikTok. What the hell? And she directed the second season of the TikTok series Love Songs, sponsored by Tinder. We've also got Alyce Adams, who is an investment manager at Screen Australia in the online department. Her role includes managing development, production, and completion funding for multiple online projects across YouTube, Facebook, ABC iView, SBS On Demand, Netflix, and Stan.
Hello.
And of course, oops, sorry. Hate this online stuff. You can't gauge people's behavior and when to talk. So we might have a few awkward pauses where I'm like, you go. I was just going to quickly introduce as well our Auslan interpreter, Amber, who also might have a guest replacement at some point, TBC, later in this session. But sorry, thank you for joining us, all of you.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So just a quick overview before we dive in for everybody. My headphones are beeping, which means terribly the battery might run out. Oh well. So we're going to start with a quick discussion of some firsthand experiences, just to get everyone familiar with the types of work that we do. And then we'll kind of broaden out to talk about more, creative and artistic, profound matters. And then we'll broaden out even more again to talk about industrial aspects and, equity and politics and the future, really, because what is storytelling on social media, if not the future? A little reminder too that we'll be taking audience questions at the end. So if you'd like to leave some, you can do so via the YouTube comments, and someone will bring it up for me to select from at the end. Reminder number 2, oh my God, so much housekeeping. You can watch Love Bug, Love Songs, and Scattered all for free on TikTok right now. So don't do it right now because we're going to be chatting and we're going to be infinitely compelling. But afterwards, you can continue that level of compelling by watching the series. Okay, great. Oh, sorry, last one. Oh my gosh. If you'd like to join in the conversation, you can use the hashtag EWF21. Okay, I'm done. Sorry. I'm going to start with an icebreaker just to get us all in the chatting mindset. What is your favorite thing that you've seen on TikTok recently?
I really love the Adult Swim trend that's going on right now. It's like a certain track of music, and then at the end you reveal AS, like Adult Swim, and it's just really cool, and it's kind of the best marketing tactic I've seen so far. Yeah. And it's just really inventive, and there's just some cool stuff.
Yeah, it's very visual.
Yeah, it's very visual, and just there's always a new thing, so it just keeps going, which is cool. What were you going to say?
My favorite my favorite thing in the moment is a series that I'm watching on TikTok called Rune, which is a kind of a YA parody series. So kind of lovingly making fun of the tropes of kind of dystopian YA series, but it's a world where everyone is separated by the zodiac sign. And the girl plays all the different characters and just on a green screen, but it's so fun. There's 2 seasons of it. I think the 3rd season is starting today. So I think it's a good example, especially we'll be talking about kind of scripted content on there in different ways, that this is, very low production value and 1 cast member, but it has like really good story and great views as well.
Cool.
That is incredible. I feel like incredibly behind. I was just going to say that I really like, that trend where there's you suggest a statement and then there's that done, and then you kind of educate people. That's my favorite, which is so lowbrow. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Clearly I am not a connoisseur.
I spent like 10 hours yesterday on TikTok, so I'm deep in there.
But definitely, though, I think what you've both highlighted in the 2 very drastically different, examples that you've put forward is that TikTok is quite a powerful and potent medium for storytelling, like in different ways. There's, on one hand, you can use it to quietly market something while also telling an actually interesting story on one hand. On the other hand, you can build an entirely, expansive, sprawling world in your bedroom with your own face. That's incredible.
It's so cool.
And so I guess, building on that idea of storytelling and world building and all that stuff, potential, maybe let's talk now about your actual experiences with the medium. Maybe Imogen, let's start with you. 2.5 million views. That is immense. What the hell is going on? Just for reference, Australia has 21 million people. Like, that's a lot of people. Can you talk us through the experience of making Lovebug and maybe where the idea came from?
I think the idea came last year. So in April last year, I was meant to go to London, go to a film festival, have a little sojourn overseas. Obviously, it did not happen, RIP. But I sort of was in this like manic state because my plans had been changed. And within a week, I sort of wrote a script, contacted my 2 lovely actors, Justin Amunkwa and Maddie McWilliam, who are incredible and who I work with all the time. And over that week, we sort of hopped on Zoom, workshopped the 1st season, and then put it up, recorded it all through Zoom, and then put it up on the Afters sort of Facebook page. And then that got about 40,000 views. And just was something I needed to do to like expel some like energy. I don't know what I was drinking at the time, but anyway. And then later, a few months later, I was like, I'd love to expand this into something bigger. So then we went to Screen Australia and got some money. Thank you so much, Alyce. And was able to sort of expand on the idea and explore the characters deeply and put it onto Instagram and then later TikTok. So I was just really interested by like TikTok as a medium and how you can tell stories on there and the accessibility to audience and all that sort of stuff. So it just seemed like a no-brainer, really.
So can I just confirm, so you made the series during lockdown, is that right?
So the first season, it's like confusing. So there's like a first season, which is like very, very lo-fi. And that was we made that during one of the first weeks of lockdown last year. And then for season 2, which is really the main season, we weren't in lockdown at that point. We could film it in person, but all COVID safe. And we did it in one house and it was all very contained. So it was good that we could actually like be in person for that, have the camaraderie and stuff. So yeah.
And Alyce, what was the response like at Screen Australia? Lovebug would have been, I imagine, some kind of risk, right? Because it's a new platform, it's a strange platform, short, super short episodes, like vertical orientation. Was there what convinced you to jump aboard?
Well, I guess we see the online department in particular as really where experimental content should come from. And I suppose, pride ourselves a bit on taking those risks. So we'd already done a vertical series with content on ABC. That was our first one. And we were really interested in that space. So when Lovebug came along, first off, Imogen had already made the first season on her own. So we could see, basically it was acted as a really good proof of concept to us. And then when talking with her, the idea of, putting on a different platform outside of Facebook in terms of like the audience that they were wanting to go after as well. We as a department were interested in basically experimenting on Instagram and on TikTok. And actually, Lovebug would have been one of our first vertical shows. Like probably after content, it was then Lovebug. So it was always discussed as an experiment when we were talking about it. And that's obviously, having the right, how much funding are we giving to it at that still experimental level? And I'm sure Imogen can talk about, making stuff on a small budget. But that was kind of the strength to us was the first season, and then the distribution of it in a new space, and what we could see, what we could learn from that going out on Instagram and on TikTok.
I love that you brought up content, which was this sleeper hit that blew up. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, people thought that it was a real Instagram live of someone. This is the first episode, which is not a spoiler. I'll look it up if you haven't. Is that she crashes because she's on her phone, which is quite relatable, I think, for many of not me, but some people who do amazing doing things when they're driving. Don't tell not PTV, Vic Roads. But so you've both now talked about the platform, and so I mean, Imogen, you talked about it being initially on the Afters Facebook page, but obviously it ended up on.
Where did it end up? You just cut out there.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was talking about everyone technical difficulties. I blame my glowing face. I think probably just cannot handle this level of luminosity. I was asking about the decision to go with TikTok as a platform, because there would have been a lot of other options around at the time, like IGTV. There was Snapchat. There was that weird. Was it Quibi?
Yeah.
The rise and fall.
Yeah. So what made you decide on TikTok specifically?
Me? We did try IGTV, lol. So I think, and Alyce did caution us at the time, and we did not listen. But it's just a different algorithm, different way of building social media, I guess, of Instagram and YouTube, you have to build an audience over a long period of time, it seems. And TikTok was something that I was already using religiously during lockdown anyway. So it felt to me way more accessible in the way that the algorithm works. You can still go viral, and you can sort of access your audience in a way that you can't really do on other platforms anymore. It's sort of, what was your question again? I keep looking at myself like a very terrible person, so I'm going to put this in front of me.
Your hair is amazing. I mean, I look at you as well. There's all this bounce going on.
Oh my god, that's so embarrassing.
Hello, Michelle, our second interpreter. Welcome. The question is, what made you choose TikTok?
Yeah, so I guess it was just honestly, I think just being an emerging creative and on my phone all the time and all that sort of stuff, I don't even see the difference between traditional 16:9 content and vertical content. Because now we're trying to move Lovebug somewhere else, and people are like, oh, we don't do vertical content. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're living in a vertical world. So I'm just anyway, it made sense to me. And also with lower budgets, and if you're moving really quickly and making stuff really quickly, you can get away with a lot and make it look way more expensive when you only have to show this much of a room or something. And if you want to make a crowd, you can get 3 people and then it looks like a full room. So it really lends itself to micro budget stuff. And that apparently is my wheelhouse. So
What about you, Alyce? I mean, I assume you would have. I mean, I don't know what the behind the scenes conversations were in terms of getting Love Bug on TikTok, but either you personally or Screen Australia as a whole, was there a kind of concerted decision to go with TikTok? Is there a kind of partnership? Is there a kind of, studies done about audience, anything like that?
I mean, I guess it's kind of our own research, and that's part of our job, is knowing what is happening in the online space and what's popular. So I guess I'd been tracking TikTok since like 2019, and was really interested and excited about the space. So we were just looking for creators who wanted to make stuff on that space and had some sort of track record. So I mean, I think by the time Lovebug came in, that's just when we were starting to see that maybe scripted stuff could work on TikTok. So it was kind of like, we can experiment on Instagram, but also let's look at TikTok as a place for it to go. And that's Scattered, like one of your shows. That was the first project that we gave development funding to, and specifically for TikTok. So within our department, we were really excited about it. And then obviously when we're essentially pitching it at our own decision meeting and getting other people on board, it is a bit more of an education in terms of what TikTok is, how it works. Everyone now knows what YouTube is, but I actually did some internal presentations kind of about the online space, and I did a section on TikTok, so more people would be kind of aware of what the platform is. So there, everyone at Screen Oz kind of trusts us in our department, and we just have to back it. So if we're saying we're excited about projects on TikTok, they'll go with us, and we're hoping that we have a few projects now on TikTok and more to come that we can show that it is a really exciting place for new emerging creators to get their start.
It also justified my year-long binge sessions on TikTok. So I was like, I wasn't wasting time, okay? I was doing
exactly.
No, you were doing research, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You needed to be immersed in the platform that you were wading into.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, there's definitely a lot of potential to reach people on TikTok. I mean, this isn't an advertorial by any means, but just going by the numbers, there are almost like 700 million people worldwide, like users who are registered to TikTok. In Australia alone, there are about 2.5 million Australians as well. Hey, that's the same number, Imogen.
Hey,
you just get like all those people. You just got Australians. But so, I mean, shifting gears a little, so maybe Alyce is stepping back quickly for this question. Love Song Season 2, Imogen, didn't receive Screen Australia funding. It was a corporate partner, so Tinder. Was there a difference in experience? Because you were across both, right? You've experienced both government funding and corporate funding. Was it a different experience for you?
I guess it's all about storytelling, right? So it was like taking the scripts and working with the actors and making it the most like compelling, funny, touching, moving thing it could be. So I guess I was thinking about the branding aspect of it a little bit, but mostly just sort of making sure it feels natural and feels like part of a cohesive world, and it isn't like the Truman Show where they like bring out the oatmeal and they're like, So I think that was like, I guess the line we had to walk, and in the edit as well. But Tinder were pretty chill, and I've made 2 ads for them in the past, so I like unofficially work for them now, I guess. So I like, they're, from my experience, they're pretty good, and it's all about love and connection, which is at the heart of the story. So I wasn't too stressed about it, but it is interesting having that sort of person to answer to, particularly when you come from a space where you've been making your own content and just for yourself and just super micro budget. So it's more just about like working well as a team and making sure that you're not going too rogue and that you're like honoring the story. So it's kind of those basics were really what was front of mind. So yeah.
I like this idea of not going rogue, which segues perfectly to my next question.
Oh, you're welcome.
Which is that obviously working on a platform like TikTok and anything else that is vertical or that is social media based, comes with a whole bunch of constraints and limitations. So even just, for you who's come from the feature filmmaking world, you would have had to reorient your own kind of lens on the world to be vertical, right? And then, even for Alyce, maybe someone looking at funding a program, you need to think about how a script or an idea would work in a minute compared to an episode that is 30 minutes. For either of you, maybe actually we'll start with Alyce. You've talked about in our chats before this that you're a big believer in constraints and how they're conducive to creating good work. Could you maybe talk more about that for the audience?
Yeah, I think I guess what I see a lot of the time with kind of first-time web series creators when they're talking to me is that the ideas that they want to do are really, really large. And sometimes they go off and make them, and it's so big, it costs them so much money to do it, but it's still kind of their first piece of work. So it's not as great as, it's going to be, because it's their first time making something, but they've spent a lot of time and money trying to achieve this dream, where I feel like if they had more constraints, like a limit on locations, on actors, budget, and running time, that they probably would have made something stronger. So I think constraints help focus you, because it kind of cuts out all your other options. So you're not distracted by like, oh, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could have this extra person, or maybe if the episode was just a few minutes longer, then I could really nail this. Whereas for short form content, you don't have that luxury. So especially TikTok is really, hyper, takes that point to the extreme. If you can't get the story beats to fit within a minute, well, that's too bad. TikTok doesn't give you 65 seconds; it gives you 60 seconds. So you have to figure out a way for that to work. So I do think it's also a really good writing exercise and filmmaking exercise. When you have those limitations put on you, you actually kind of come up with better work. At least that's my opinion.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Yes.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say I definitely agree with that in terms of constraints making better art and sort of challenging you to think more creatively about how you can solve a problem. And often it sort of gives you more like a better product or like a better story, I guess. And also forces you to like actually do it. Because if you have all the time in the world and all the money in the world, you could make something amazing. And I'd love to give that a go. But you also are like forced into the practicalities of filmmaking, which is also what I love. Like I love problems and constraints, weirdly. But yeah, so that's why I love TikTok.
I mean, speaking to an audience of writers and aspiring screenwriters or filmmakers, perhaps, certainly I would like to think that they are familiar with the idea of working within constraints. I mean, certainly speaking from the writer perspective, when we were working on the script for Scattered, I mean, we had very clear, I guess, decisions that we came to in the writer's room while working on the scripts, which would be, for example, having a very, very immediate hook at the start of each episode. Like it has to grab attention because otherwise someone will just scroll up and be disinterested. And then at the very end, there has to be a clear cliffhanger, because if there's no cliffhanger, then they're not going to want to, tune in to the next episode. And while these are things that exist in traditional shows, I think they were much more pronounced in writing for this platform, because there are these very specific sets of expectations, and also because there's just so much competition. Like the feeds are very, very like they're saturated. Was that something that you had to think about when you were writing and directing either or both series, Imogen?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think it was something we were constantly talking about and thinking about, is like how, because the scripts already had them in there for love songs, like the hook at the beginning and the cliffhanger at the end. So then it was about how do you make that, communicate that visually, and how do you get someone to stop scrolling, like you said, Adolfo. And similar with Love Bug, like because it wasn't originally designed for TikTok, like the episodes are longer than a minute, I had to re-edit them into a minute. So that was also how I edited things and could experiment with things of like okay, do I start the dialogue here or do I start it here? And sort of make this little Frankenstein episode to kind of get those hooks and cliffhangers in there. But I think as well, what's so great about that is that is, like you said, core to storytelling and the muscles of telling story. And when you move, if you want to move into TV, log form storytelling, like those muscles are really strong and you've practiced them and you've kind of gotten much better at them. And that's, once you write a scene in a TV show, like that's kind of how they are meant to be, you know? So I think it's all kind of, yeah, just this like really like lean, sick way of storytelling that's like essentially just getting you to get really good or get better at, telling stories and getting people interested and engaged.
So stepping back a little and looking at more kind of holistic stuff, both Love Bug and Love Songs deal with obviously love, as the title suggests, but very specifically the experience of young love, you know, like that awkward territory for young people, and also how I suppose apps and mobile phone use impact, or, you know, for better or for bad, those experiences of love. I'd like to go back to that and ask you, Imogen, about those kind of concrete things. But Alyce, from a general perspective, do you find that there are certain subject matters or certain story beats that work better in this kind of online space, better than others? And does that factor into your decisions, I guess, in funding as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we're looking at creative ideas that come to us, there can be projects that are creatively really strong, but don't fit, don't feel like they are actually a web series or make sense as a short form series. And that can be generally because the story is about, you know, is quite broad. So maybe it's about, you know, struggling, figuring life out in your 20s and now, you know, struggling, figuring life out in your 30s, which is, you know, stories that we can all relate to, but is already being well catered to in the broadcaster and streaming services. So when we're looking at series, we're not after you know, ideas that are, you know, only for young people. I think that's kind of a misconception, but we're after stories that are for audiences who don't feel like they're being serviced on the broadcaster and more traditional spaces. So I think, yeah, in Australia at the moment, we don't really have that much TV or films that are for younger audiences that are teen or in their 20s. And, you know, that's why I think Love Songs and Love Bug work. But, you know, it's also about bigger things like representation, and, you know, Scattered is a good example of that in terms of, you know, catering to a queer audience, because we're not seeing that as much in other places. So I guess that's what we look for in online, is that, yes, can be young audiences, but also, you know, I watched a web series that was for Grey Nomads, and it was sponsored by car sales. You know, so that's clearly for a quite an older audience. So, you know, it can be for anyone as long as they have an internet connection.
Nice swap over. And Imogen, so going back to you, so yeah, this is a very specific, well, it's a general subject matter, love, but then it's been honed into we've talked about constraints and refining and polishing. You've honed into a very specific version of that. I mean, you've talked about how Love Bug was influenced by, I didn't realize this, your autobiographical experience.
Lol.
I'm so sorry. Yes, lol indeed. But I mean, I imagine Love Songs was not. So yeah, what led you to choosing that experience, to depict that story from that point of view?
Well, I think there were lots of things. Like, I think, like Alyce said, like, I've definitely submitted things to Screen Australia before for competitions or whatever before that was like life in your 20s, like la, 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 which is great. And like, you obviously start there and then realize that is, you are kind of, well, that's the whole thing of maturing as an artist, right? Is like working your way through cliches to something a bit more, you know, refined or from your own personal experience. And I think what I really wanted to explore with Love Bug in particular was, yes, lol, a bit of catharsis, but it was just, that was only a starting point. But what I really wanted to explore was how young people genuinely use screens and use social media and how they interact with each other, because I'd never really seen it properly, or at least how I felt authentically portrayed on TV or in popular media or whatever, because it's always like, you know, some person tripping in the schoolyard and the other kids are like somehow filming them and they're like hashtag fail. I was like, that has literally never happened. So I just found that idea of like, there's this term for something called Gatsbying, like the Great Gatsby, how he like throws parties hoping that Daisy comes up because he's a little simp. Like that's what I find so interesting, like after breakups, is like sort of the performative aspect of being online, and then how that can be, for better or for worse, part of your journey through the heartbreak. So I wanted to explore that sort of dissonance of performing your best life online and then also spiraling inside. So that's kind of was the impetus for Love Bug, and hopefully in a way that seems, authentic and genuine and funny and sad. So,
I mean, jumping off from the idea that there is a relatability has to be factored into, both from funding and from storytelling, then I definitely think, no, that's I mean, I enjoyed watching Love Bug. I giggled quite a lot at how authentic and relatable those were. I have done my share of, what is it called? Gatsbying. I thought it was called peacocking. All these terms.
Same thing. Yeah, exactly.
The things, just showing of being I'm so hot now, you missing out, whatever.
And checking if they've watched your stories, and you're like, this is
everyone's always checking the stories. Yes, but you do it anyway. We all do it.
Oh yeah.
So I think I'd love to now talk big, political stuff, industry stuff. Directing this to Alyce. So you mentioned earlier this kind of almost like a...
Oh, no.
I'll come back.
What was he going to say?
And did I cut out again?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Just
why does this keep happening?
At a very dramatic point.
I have the NBN. Apologies, audience. Please just be happy that I am otherwise, I hope, engaging. What was my question? Oh, yes. You talked about, Alyce, how these shows have this kind of ability to redress underrepresentation. And, I think something that's relevant to this talk in particular, being co-presented by the Other Film Festival and Arts Access Victoria, is that accessibility, factor to these kinds of shows and these platforms. Could you maybe, just to get a sense of the lay of the land, could you regale us with some maybe particular success stories that you've seen go through the hallowed halls of Screen Australia?
Yeah. The cool thing about the online department is that it has been around for so long now. It had different names, but it's been at least 10 years. So there is great track record of creators who maybe got their first start through our department, making their first web series, and are now either directing, working in TV, making their own TV shows, doing their own movies. I think one of the ones that is a big success is the catering show. The Kates then went on to make Get Cracking, and are really successful. Recently, Casey Anning was at the Amazon upfronts where they're announcing the new Australian Amazon shows. One of her projects is up, and again she made a web series that we funded as well. So that's great to see. Even Auntie Donna made a lot of stuff online now. Have their really out there Netflix series. But I think also a big touch point for us is Starting From Now, which was one of the world's first lesbian drama series. And I know that Julie, the creator of that, talks a lot about why she made that show, because she wasn't seeing herself anywhere, especially not in Australia. So she made 3 seasons on her own and then got funding from Screen Australia to make the rest. And that was a really important step for the team to get that backing. And she's now got on to make First Day on ABC, and the second season is coming out soon as well, and it's won tons of awards, especially around its kind of representation of a transgender girl going to school. So yeah, I think that breaking through in terms of barriers in the film industry is really hard, and that online is, I guess, the place where that barrier isn't there, or it should be easier to get through. And I think in terms of the projects that we fund and the creators that we support, that's definitely true. I think that we are one of the more diverse departments in getting that content out there, because our main thing is, will this be watched by an audience, and can you demonstrate that you have a really active and hungry audience looking to see your show? So for people that aren't seeing either themselves or even just a particular interest that they have reflected on screen, then you can make a really successful series, and that's what we see coming through our department.
I think the great thing about this topic of accessibility in terms of these platforms and this type of storytelling is it's not just accessibility from the producer end, where there are lower barriers to entry, and it's maybe perhaps not as intimidating to create work because they're shorter. I mean, at the same time, they're also much more difficult because they're shorter. But there's, I suppose, less of a pressure to fill out the gap, to have a lot of funding, etc. But at the same time, that also means there's accessibility from the audience perspective, because a lot of these things are free and you can watch them. I mean, I think these types of shows pioneered the idea of on demand. You can click when you want, you can activate, you can pause, go to the toilet, live your life for a little bit, take care of your child or whatever, and then continue watching. But so now, Alyce, you've brought up a few times how people, I suppose, take risks, find their voice. Imogen, you've talked about how this can be an effective kind of, maybe not practice run, but a provocation or a challenge to refine your craft. Is there a risk, do you think, that creating works in this context for these platforms is just seen, will be seen or will be forever tainted with this brush of being just a stepping stone? So it's not going to be taken seriously as an art form in its own right?
It's a good question. I think it depends who you're talking to. So I think because TikTok is so new, I guess. Like I've told people, my show has 2.5 million views on TikTok, and they're like, what is this tickety-tock? And they're like, that's nice. Even though, that's bigger viewership numbers than you would get on TV in Australia. So, I think it depends who you're talking to and what their understanding is of the internet and of storytelling. And I can understand if you've never used something like TikTok, or if you don't engage with social media and you're of a sort of different way of thinking about film and TV, like it could be a bit of a foreign thing. But to me, it makes so much sense as a storytelling medium. And like for me personally, like, I don't know, I'm a bit like manic, and I love, I've made a feature film and I've made some web series now, and I make short films, and I'm going to make another short film for $300 next week, because I just love telling stories. So I'm a bit agnostic in terms of the platforms I use, because I just want to keep telling stories. But then it's also like, how does one get paid? Which is the perennial question. But so personally, I think there is art and there is so much amazing stuff happening on the internet personally. But I think it's a matter of perception. And I think inevitably the way things are going, people will catch up and see it as something valid and give me a job.
Yeah, I think money. Yeah, I mean, I think the main holdback from it being taken more seriously is the money side of it. How do you get paid doing it, and how do you make money off of it? Yeah. Which is very valid, because you may love working in the short form space, but how do you make it sustainable for yourself? So we deal with all different types of creators. Ones who want to use it as an example of their type of work that they're doing, and but want to then move onwards, and then other creators who are happy staying in that space. I think that the best example that I have in terms of projects that we've worked with is Meta Runner, which is an animated Australian series that I call it the most successful web series you've never heard of, because it has over 10 million views, and the team make a lot of money on the ads and selling merchandise. But unless you're a fan of that show and their YouTube channel, you would never have heard of them. But that's completely fine, because the model is sustainable for them. And they've gone from two brothers in their bedroom to having over 20 people working in the office in Parramatta. So it is feasible to make it work, but it does take, like anything, I guess, a lot of hours and time put into that one area. So it's up to creators to figure out, what exactly is their priority. But yeah, I think money is the main factor for everyone, because you got to live. If you can work doing that, then you can stay in the online space.
Yeah, completely. I think there's another benefit as well of doing it online, is that it forces you to be a producer a lot of the time, and inevitably that will make you more literate and more understanding of what it is. If you do want to move into TV and film, like, that will only be good for you in terms of like knowing how to reach an audience, knowing what your brand is, knowing what your strengths are, and seeking out partnerships if you want to do that to get paid, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's like inevitably, in addition to storytelling, it's like it will teach you so many skills that will serve you really well if you want to transition. So yeah, but it is, and like I think Love Songs is a great example of something where the first season did not have a partnership, and then the second season was sponsored by Tinder. So it's definitely out there for people who are switched on and are exploring different ways to get their stories out there. Yeah.
I might just quickly clarify for some of the less aware members of the audience who may be writers and may not be aware of because I had to learn this at university from having studied cinema stuff. The producer is the money person and the audience person. Mm-hmm. The director is the creative person. So as writers, I know you all do this on your own all of the time anyway, but I do think it is relevant when Imogen's saying in terms of just, honing your skills and really thinking about the money stuff. On that audience note, and related to this, sorry, it's another big question. Alyce, you mentioned earlier about how, for example, Scattered has received such love from the queer audience because it's about a queer story, and queer stories are underrepresented in mainstream outlets. But then, by that same token, do you think that there is a risk as well, or is it a setback at all? Maybe it's not a setback, but do you think there's a risk of, a kind of ghettoization or a kind of like hyper niche sort of self-trap being created in this kind of context where you're making stories that resonate with your experience, that resonates with a very specific audience, that then perhaps might be inaccessible to larger or different segments of the audience, of the broader audience?
Yeah, I think in terms of like under the queer umbrella, like that is actually, a very huge audience. And, it is a niche, but is also massive. So I think for a lot of creators, when they're creating their show to tap into that niche, it's, can act as a proof of concept or, a demonstration of your interests and your skills to then pitch to something bigger. So I think, in the Scattered example, that's a show that was obviously designed for TikTok, but the subject and the emotions of it are something that could work on a bigger screen if that was the goal of the creators. And I think we're looking at projects that are coming to us and have those niche audiences, but there's nothing stopping people from also going towards development funding for TV or for feature with their ideas. So yeah, I think it is an interesting question, but I know for Screen Australia, the main important is like, are people going to watch this? And we have different ways of viewing that through different departments. But as long as you can prove that there is an audience or an audience demand for something, then that's the biggest sign off that we're after.
Did you feel in any way trapped in that regard, Imogen, in terms of, because I mean, TikTok is a very Gen Z platform. And I mean, I don't know, I don't presume to know what your age is, but I mean, oh my gosh, what?
I have really good skincare.
A wunderkind. Love to use that word.
I'm absolutely not 18.
Yeah, was that something? Well, I mean, I imagine obviously, like as a creative, you think about your audience, but did you feel in any way hemmed in? I was going to say helmed in, but yeah, while you were helming, did you feel hemmed in by that idea that, you know, you need to make, that you maybe need to use the slang, or you might want to make a reference that they might not know about? Was that something that you, felt you had to think about?
I guess, like, I am like between Gen Z and millennials. So I'm like an older Gen Z or a younger millennial, depending on who is making those outlines or whatever distinctions. So I know how cringy it is when people write in slang. Like, I find, because the cultural conversation is always moving, and it's moving at a breakneck speed on TikTok. So even if it's like you want to hop on a trend, it's like by the time you do that, it's already gone. It's in the rear view mirror, like she's gone. So I think it's just going back to like what is my authentic experience, and I collaborate with actors a lot, and so it's sort of like bringing that to the fore. And I think that was the most important thing for me, is like, are the emotions genuine, and is the way that we're interacting with social media, which doesn't change as often, because, you know, a text is a text, and you will always like screenshot a dodgy, you know, message someone sends you and send it to your friend, or, you know, like, I think those kind of things that I hadn't seen in on TV or anything before, which were way more relatable to me, was what I was kind of wanting to tap into. And just like the humor in that. So I didn't feel trapped per se. It was more just like, I wanted to see that because
you wanted to rise up to the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Break free.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I think we might move to audience questions now. I believe there is someone in charge of potentially typing the questions, but we had one that was emailed to us in advance. So I'm going to ask that one as we wait for none as yet. Rude. What are y'all doing? Wake up. Come on. I'm going to ask the one via email while y'all think about a question for us. So this question is mostly for Alyce. Could you please offer some clarification as to what affords someone the label of emerging from a Screen Australia POV? And is emerging different depending on whether it's for traditional screen versus for online?
Yeah, that's a good question. On the website, when you are submitting your application, it does actually provide a list of how we categorize. So emerging, there's grassroots, emerging, then two other ones, you know. But emerging is generally you've made maybe a short film, you have a credit to your name, but we do kind of look at it differently depending on the department. So if you're coming in for online, the eligibility is fairly low. You need to have made one thing before, which could be a short film, or you've released a web series. So if you've made one or two short films, that's generally where most people are when they are coming to us for funding. That's the biggest project they're pitching to do, is getting funding from us to make something that could be maybe an hour's worth of content. Whereas obviously if you were going for a feature or a TV, you would generally have bigger credits behind you, either TV or another feature film, or a short film that has done really well in festivals. So it can be harder to get funding for those bigger projects. So again, that's why we see online is a really good space for first-time creators to get their shot, because we're willing to take more of a risk. So you may have only made one short film or a few things, but we'll give you a go, basically, as long as all the other elements are there.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong as well, but I imagine you look at if a person is a slashy like me, I'm going to use myself as an example just because it's relevant. So obviously, while I'm a seasoned veteran in all of my other aspects of my life, I am definitely an emerging screenwriter because Scattered was my first screenwriting gig. So I assume, I mean, obviously you look at that as well, the relative kind of positionality, right, of the person in terms of whether and their career.
We look at the whole team as well. So maybe there are, people, like yourself, it was your first time doing screen, but you have other members on the team, either in producing or directing, that do have more of a track record. And so then it's like, oh, great. Then this person is going to be really well supported because they have other people there to help them. So it's always good to have a mix in the team to make sure that, the project is going to get made.
And representing different viewpoints as well. Here's another question, but I might just broaden it out to be a little bit more general. What piece of advice would you give to new and emerging writers and filmmakers, I guess, whether it be, making stories and writing and filming, maybe even acting for TikTok and similar platforms, but maybe also generally?
Imogen, you go first.
Advice to emerging people. I guess I am a big fan of just like making stuff, and I have always, like I said, like worked in a micro budget level. Like feature film was made for $4,000. Like I've made short films that are either cost nothing or they cost like $300. Like Love Bug was honestly like the biggest budget I had ever. And like, it's not that much when I talk to anyone else who's an actual like person. But to me, I was like, oh my God, so much money. So I guess that is like, because I think there is that thing of like, you can have what you think is the most brilliant idea, but you need to test it by writing it down, making it into a script, getting it up on its feet. Like there's just so much you learn from that process. And like inevitably the first thing you make is not going to be that great. And like I definitely have plenty of, not very good short films under my belt, which at the time I was like, I am a genius. But I had to like work through that to realize that the themes were there and the core sort of viewpoint was there, but it just wasn't, it's that, what is it? The taste and your ability weren't matching up. So I think, it does sort of bristle sometimes when more established people than me are just like, you can just make stuff on your iPhone and get into Sundance. That's probably not going to happen. But what you can do is
a shade.
I know. Well, look, it's not the 90s anymore, guys. Sundance is not accessible. So, but what you can do is get out your iPhone and make a TikTok or make something that is more accessible and that is sort of with this culture of like everyone's doing that, everyone's making their own stuff. So yeah, that would be my advice and what has worked for me so far. And like we want to see it. I'll watch it.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. I guess find your people, find your team that you're going to work with. So while it could be really exciting to try and talk to the head of Matchbox or get in front of Netflix and talk to them, it's your peers who you're going to go through all your learning with, and that 5 years later, if you're still around with them, they're now successful, or now they've launched this or got this opportunity, and they're the ones who maybe are going to ask like, hey, I need someone in my writer's room. Can you come help me, or doing the same? So really finding the group of people that you connect with and can make things with, because as you progress through the industry, you're going to do that together, and then can I guess have a better chance of finding those opportunities from your friends who you know worked on their short film for no dollars, and now you know they're got a role for you where they can actually pay you to do it. That I think that's really useful and valuable, and for a lot of filmmakers, that's the hardest part, is you know finding your producer, finding your director, you know, especially if you're a writer, of like, you know, I've got this great idea, but how do I get it made? It's a matter of finding those people so that you can work together and then, you know, achieve those really cool projects. Lovely.
Amazing. Get it done, I guess, is what you're saying. Be brave, take risks, and find people to support you. These are all great things to end on. On that note, I would like to thank you both again for this incredibly riveting conversation. Thank you to Amber and Michelle, our Auslan interpreters. Thank you to the Emerging Writers Festival, the Other Film Festival, and Arts Access Victoria for having us. Don't forget that you can watch Lovebug, Love Songs, Scattered, and a whole galaxy of other incredible work, both lo-fi and more hi-fi, on TikTok and other available outlets for your swiping and viewing pleasure. Thank you again for joining us, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.